Hey, folks, Zach Osterman here, IU Insider Indianapolis Starters. Mind your banners for Thursday, November 6th, 2025. He is Mike Niziolek. I'm Zach Osterman. The weekly Mind Your Banners got moved around a little bit this week, primarily because of the basketball opener on Wednesday. We wanted to sort of digest that. We didn't do a post-game show after that. We won't do one just like last year. We probably won't do one for every single basketball game, but we will obviously want to talk about that today, and so I think we'll probably get to that more toward the end of the show. But Mike, you look bright-eyed and bushy-tailed.
I'm tired. I'm very tired.
It's a busy time. It's a busy time, and it's a busy time because it's time to talk about playoff rankings. That's the point in the season that we're at. How's that for an industry segue? Indiana debuts at number 2 in the first. The CFP selection committee's first playoff rankings. Listen, these things don't mean much right now. Like, I mean, I think we all can recognize at this point that this is just done for ratings and clicks and whatever. And hey, we're happy to have them. If we were being a little bit more sort of fair-minded about it, I think probably what would make the most sense was for the committee to release rankings either this week or next week, and then not release them again until the end of the season. But we're going to do this ad nauseum. I kind of had my say, at least very briefly, on Tuesday night with just kind of a quick reaction pod. You weren't able to join because you were at the women's game.
I wasn't able to join. I was asked not to join. You're like, I'm doing this right now without you.
I didn't ask you not to join. I just wanted hold on. No. Okay, let's be really fair about this. I wanted to get to work, and you were at the women's game. I didn't say I'm not going to include you. I said I'm sorry, but I'm not going to delay the podcast until
I'm not going to include you.
So you can get on the podcast. It's okay for us to cover separate ground together. There's 2 of us. That's what the advantage is.
I could have called in if I knew you were doing it.
I don't think you would have. I think you would have said, I'm on press row. Please leave me alone. But I'm just curious, like, basically for your thoughts. You know, I mean, just Indiana at number 2. You know, we see where maybe some of Indiana's past opponents have landed. Illinois is not there. Iowa's at 20. Oregon's at 9. Of course, Ohio State is at 1. Just like, what were your first blush kind of reactions?
Yeah, well, in this case, I don't think it's that the ratings don't, or I mean, the rankings don't matter, like existentially, like you're talking about. They don't, in the specific case, they don't matter because Ohio State and Indiana are on track to play each other. So whatever the rankings end up being, it really doesn't matter until after the Big Ten title game, unless either get tripped up here. But they're on a collision course, so it's all going to get decided on the field, and that's not always the case. And so, but with 1 and 2, I mean, really, what are we talking about, right? I mean, you could split hairs. You could say Indiana deserved. I think Indiana probably had a good argument in the room. I think I read on the conference call that they said Indiana had a strong case, that there was probably a healthy debate about ranking Indiana above Ohio State, because I think when you kind of look at the important metrics that they kind of that matter, the strength of schedule, and they have proprietary strength of schedule metrics. So, like, I'm not sure where Ohio State and Indiana, like, what the difference was. But I'm sure Indiana answered all the concerns, you know, the committee had about the resume last year that was so low, you know, ranked so low. So Indiana probably had a good argument that they didn't win. It doesn't bother me. And I think part of that is that these teams are going to probably play each other. And if they don't, then it wouldn't have mattered anyway, because one of them's wasn't supposed to be there, right? Like, if they get tripped in the next 4 weeks.
Matt Rhodes, who's Baylor's AD, and he's the selection committee chair this year, that was the first question he got. And it was funny because it was framed to him. I think it was our friend Joey Kaufman over at the Columbus Dispatch. So this wasn't like, you know, somebody from Texags getting on and being like, why is A&M not number 1 or you know, Indiana, whatever. But it was very much framed as Ohio State, Indiana, and A&M. And his full answer is, good evening. I certainly appreciate the question. There was robust discussion about 1 through 3, all of them undefeated. And then he doesn't mention Texas A&M again.
Well, yeah, but I think that's a sign
that's about as. In fact, he never actually says the words Texas A&M in the answer. It's very clearly Ohio State and Indiana. And I think the telling thing that he says is both defenses, both offenses ranked in the top 5. He talks about their quality wins. He said, so it was certainly close, but when we looked at film and we're blessed to have committee members and coaches that do a lot of film work, we just felt like Ohio State had a slight edge when we think about offensive line play and then a slight edge defensively. That was really the outcome. He also mentioned them having what he called explosive players. I thought the more telling bit was when somebody asked about Notre Dame, and he basically just said, we think Notre Dame looks good, because that was probably the most maybe only really controversial sort of decision was Notre Dame at 10 with Miami at 18. Of course, Miami beat Notre Dame earlier in the season. I think we can tell that their seasons are kind of on different trajectories now, but I don't think it's an unfair question to say we have a data point of comparing these two specific teams. And he basically just said, we just think Notre Dame looks good.
Well, because to your point about that, the head-to-head matchups do matter. Because I encourage people to kind of read some of what I wrote about.
Yes, HeraldTimesOnline.com.
College football playoff. I did a mock selection in September. But one thing to note about strength of schedule and head-to-head comparisons is that the way they frame it, or the way Rich Clark frames it, and kind of the guidelines is that your strength of schedule is more than just a number. It's all a story, right? So, like, even though there's a head-to-head matchup, say, early in the season, if a team looks terrible later, that's going to, usually weigh heavier on the committee's mind, and so with Notre Dame sort of trending up, Miami trending down, that's probably why that happens. But, it's not as relevant to Indiana and Ohio State because both look so good. And Indiana's sort of margin of victory is sort of capped at 24. They don't get more credit than that and all these things, but it's maxed out. But like I said, I just think that, I think there was probably a larger discussion about Ohio State and Indiana than people probably think, that it wasn't just rubber stamped that Ohio State's number one. And I think that's encouraging for Indiana fans that were, obviously upset about how they were viewed last year. I think they're in the discussion now. It's not, they are up for being the best team in the country.
Yeah, I think all that's fair. I think my takeaway, and I wrote this afterward, my takeaway is basically just like Mack Rhodes was making a really, I wouldn't necessarily say compelling argument, but certainly sort of firm argument in his own mind for the idea of subjective analysis. Like, he talked a lot about film study. He talked a lot about, I think they've got 3 ex-coaches on the committee, right? D'Antonio, Chris Alt, who basically developed the pistol with Colin Kaepernick at Nevada, and is it Mike Riley, I think, is the third one. So, there, and again, I mentioned the Notre Dame answer because that was probably the plainest, that he just sort of said, we just think they look good. Like, metrics, sure, results, sure, but we just think they look good. I think the other thing I would say, too, about, like, the rankings, and this is something that we're still learning because this is only the second year of the 12-team playoff. But it really does feel like one of the lessons that at least I felt like I took away from last year is to see the rankings more as groupings, like more kind of the idea that, like, if you're in the top 3 or 4, you are the lead pack. If you are in maybe, the 4 or 5 after that, you're comfortably in the field, but you're probably going to have an uphill battle to get a bye. And of course, the bye rules have changed this year too. The point is, like, I understand the point of pride that Indiana fans would feel being the number 1 team in the country. I get that. But what the committee was effectively saying is there are 3, maybe 4 teams that we see as comfortably above the field, the rest of the field right now. I don't even think Georgia necessarily falls in their thinking the way that Ohio State, Indiana, A&M, and maybe Alabama do. And if you're Indiana, like, that's, all the opportunities are there. Well, I would argue even, I think there's a pretty clear path to Indiana hosting if they go 12-0 and lose the Big Ten, or a bye.
That's what I think you're trying to say. I think the key distinction is the importance of having of being thought of in this way, and of being considered for number 1 even before potential Ohio State matchup, is that losing that Big Ten title game wouldn't knock you out of that group. And it sounds like they have enough respect for Indiana and Indiana's resume and metrics, because, like I said, we don't know the exact numbers. All the metrics are going to be what they were last year because all the numbers are almost the same. They're doing what they did last year. And so that healthy respect the committee has for that means, and especially coupled with the rule change they made, which will not hurt teams for losing to good teams, right? If you lose to Ohio State, you're not punished as much as you were last year. I mean, it's the number one team in the country, so you're not going to get docked unless you get trucked. You're probably not moving out of the top 4, I think, if you lose the Big Ten title game to Ohio State.
Because the other thing to consider is, and obviously there are a lot of permutations, but the 3 teams behind you are all SEC teams. Like all 3 of them have to play in the SEC championship game.
Yeah.
You don't have a situation where you could get jumped by Georgia and Alabama because they can't both win the SEC title game. In fact, as things stand, they may not both be there. So like that's
I think the encouraging part for Indiana.
Yeah, the path feels pretty comfortably open to 12-0. And as you say, as long as you don't just get absolutely run out of the building in Indianapolis, getting a bye, maybe you're not in the Rose Bowl. I understand, especially for a fan base like Indiana, the sort of cultural value of the Rose Bowl, but you'd still be in a bye situation. You'd still be going straight to the quarterfinals. Do you have any? I mean, I'm kind of more compelled, I guess, to talk about the game ahead for Indiana than the game behind. It's been a while since Maryland. A lot has happened. I mean, do you have any Maryland business, or should we just frame that all into this Penn State game?
We could do that. That's fine. You were there. So how was your trip?
It was good.
You don't eat seafood, so you don't even get crab. So like you're just.
No, but I got to go to a Caps game, which was great. I got to see some friends who live in Alexandria, which was great. I went to a donut shop that Barack Obama ate at once, which was great. I mean, it was really good. Good food, good coffee. It was just lots of fun. The landing on Friday, there was some wind. It was a little bit rocky coming down. This is, by the way, this is about as nerdy meta sports writers get when they start talking about their travel to people. It's like,
I was asking about the game, and I just like how you were doing. But
but you mentioned crab. You mentioned eating crab. That was clearly not a question about the game.
That was. Did you get crab at the game?
They had Qdoba at the game. Can you imagine if they had crab?
Hey, Qdoba? Boston College serves clam chowder at the game.
Yeah, but is it Qdoba clam chowder?
No. Yes, and everybody dies. Nobody makes it out alive.
Notre Dame almost didn't make it out alive in Chestnut Hill last weekend. It is hard for me to kind of get a feel for this game. Like there is a real extent to which, I had my old friend Sean Fitz, who I used to work with at 24/7, who's now at On 3, and he's covered Penn State for literally 20 years. And talking to him, there is a feeling of resignation around this program right now, that obviously there is such a focus on what's next. But he said even among sort of the optimistic sort of group, there is almost more of a let's just get because this is think about the sequence of this. It's at Iowa, at Ohio State, Indiana. So there's almost a let's get the other side of these 3 games and then see if we can rally to go 6-6 and go to a bowl game. But I mean, you look at Penn State and listen, they're a helmet school. At least in theory, it's one of the toughest places to play in the country. Undeniably, they have NFL talent on both sides of the ball, both lines of scrimmage, in the offensive backfield, all these different things. But man, oh man, it is one of those seasons where it feels like actively things are going as wrong as they possibly can at this point. And Drew Allar's now up for the season. The offense just has not been consistently functional all year. It's stunning to me to go look at Penn State's rushing numbers, given the fact that they have 2 NFL caliber backs and they have broken 200 yards as a team twice this season. And both those games were in non-conference play. It is just hard for me to sort of frame this against what you feel like Penn State should be compared to what Penn State is.
Well, I think you've seen kind of a pattern. Kurt Cignetti is trying to talk up in recent weeks. He didn't start doing this until 3 weeks ago. Start talking up the opponent at hand to really.
UCLA was the first one that I really remember him really.
We got to be careful. This is really a good team, and that this week it was they're still in the what did he say ESPN Power Index, which I thought was a funny metric to.
He was citing their preseason rankings, an nameless SEC
underline account. We can't sleep on this team was ranked number 1 at or 3 or whatever. It's well, I mean, not no more. I mean, it's hard. Like you said, there is the talent there. But I mean, the caveat, I mean, the thing that hurts worse than losing Franklin is the quarterback, right? Like now you have a redshirt freshman. I was looking, basically his 2 career starts are basically most of his reps. He's played in 7 games, but I mean, really not much other than these last 2. And I've said, and the Maryland game is probably the best way to tie back this, is that freshman quarterbacks, whether it's redshirt freshman or true freshman against a Brian Haynes defense, is going to have some problems. And so, like, whatever happens, if Indiana's offense gets tripped up, I still can't imagine. I mean, I know they're on the road too. Them scoring a bunch of points with the redshirt freshman against this scheme. It's too complicated, and he throws too much at guys. I mean, you saw it. Maryland, other than the scripted drive out of halftime, they had nothing, and they turned over 5 times.
Yeah, no, I mean,
it was it 4 on the quarterback, right? 2 interceptions, 2 fumbles by him, and then the 5th one was someone else getting stripped.
That sounds right. Yeah,
I mean, like 4 on the quarterback. I mean, it's like that's
a quarterback who one of his strengths this year had been that, especially for his age, he had limited his mistakes.
And Loxley's big thing, even at halftime and after the game, was that he had never seen the offense and him running the offense look that out of sync, out of sorts. And Brian Haynes is a big reason why. And I think you'll see that this weekend.
There's also this is one of those weeks where I've done the preview, the scouting podcast before this, and so I have the advantage of like someone else's perspective. But something else Sean said, something else Fitz said, is just that Andy Kotelnicki, the coordinator of Penn State, like it feels like they just try to do too much, and that he said when they attack, like when they just get downhill and they just say we're going to go at you. Not a bunch of side-to-side stuff, not a bunch of pre-snap eye candy, but like we're just going to hand the ball off. We're going to go straight at you. We're going to go downhill with our play calls and our emphasis and whatever. They can gain yards and they can move the ball. I mean, they were the first team in the country to score a touchdown, right, against Ohio State, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right? Maybe I'm losing my mind on that. Anyway, no, they weren't. Ignore me on that. Sorry. I didn't get much sleep last night either.
You're having a conversation with yourself that I am not a part of.
Which is exactly what I'm going to be doing on the drive home from Chicago on Sunday. But that eventually the offense just kind of gets in its own way, essentially. That they'll try to be too gimmicky, or that there will always be something that will set them back. And I think as you talk about, you're facing a defense that is very difficult for a young quarterback. Penn State went out and got receivers that kind of Penn State kind of seemed to want to go out and get receivers that were very like high floor, just like production guys this year, and just sort of say we have the playmaking talent we need, but those guys have not been high floor. They've not produced. I think the only area where this matchup really gives me pause is just the lines of scrimmage and the idea that Penn State probably still has NFL caliber offensive linemen, and probably, although they have not performed up to standard at all this year, they have something like, I think, 8 tackles for loss in the last 3 games, and I don't think they have a sack in either of the last season. Yeah. I don't think they have a sack in either of the last 2 games. That is still NFL talent, and this is individual motivation doesn't tend to beat team sort of structure. But this is the last chance, probably, for those guys to play in front of a lot of NFL. Like, this is going to be the most sort of NFL watched game left on the schedule for Penn State, probably.
Oh, Penn State. I was like, Indiana.
No, not for Indiana. But my point is, anybody who's either trying to make their case for the portal or make their case for the pros, like, this is the last good stage you're going to get for that this season. Again, an individual's like personal motivations don't tend to override a team's performance. But that's the one area where I look at and I just sort of say Penn State's probably still at an athletic and skill level at the lines of scrimmage that Indiana has not seen, at least since Oregon. And that's kind of the one area of the matchup that I am still just a little bit skeptical of. Or not skeptical of, but like I want to see how it plays out. Skeptical is the wrong word.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why you've seen kind of Penn State not get blown out in these games, that their talent is just – they have a higher level of talent than most teams in the Big Ten. And so, like, there is some – that hasn't gone away. I mean, obviously the quarterback situation, I think, changes the complexion of that roster. But so that's there. And, I'm interested to see how the environment's a noon game, though. I think a night game would have been rough. I mean, you've seen kind of Indiana handle these environments, and I think there is going to be something to, I think Indiana players are aware that they've never won there, and that matters. And so I think they're going to be kind of focused on finishing that. And I think they've enjoyed making history kind of every step of the way, and so I think that'll help. Sort of, you talk about getting them in focus. Trying to sell them after losing 5 games, I think, is less of a convincing argument than, hey, you could do something that's never been done in program history. Because I do think it's hard to say when you look at Penn State's sort of recent track record to be like the convinced players that this team is on the upswing or is going to be good.
Yeah, Alex Graham says here, he says Jim Knowles knew exactly what he wanted to do against Cignetti and Shanahan last year in Columbus, and he can't imagine Penn State is less talented up front than Ohio State was. I think Penn State probably is less talented than Ohio State was last year in the front six. But again, referring back to my conversation with Fitz, he said something really interesting about Knowles. He said the players have not really met the scheme, and the scheme has not really met the players. That like no one doubts that Jim Knowles is a really smart coach, but that he's not found. And there have been some injuries, like their green dot linebacker is out for the year, if I'm not mistaken. They had to plug a walk-on in eventually behind him. But there have also just been some players that just have not performed, frankly, up to preseason expectations. And there's been a feeling that essentially Knowles has just not found a place to get the, sort of the talent he has to match what he's trying to do scheme-wise.
Any concern about injuries for Indiana?
Yeah, I did a really bad job of asking this question to Curt Cignetti on.
No, because he got it. Like he just wasn't going to answer it.
Well, but go read the transcript. Like anytime there's like multiple hyphens in your question in a transcript where the transcriber had to stop because you just changed thoughts mid-question, it's not a good sign.
You didn't ask the worst question that was asked at the press conference, but you did. He did get the point, and he said as much. He's like, "I know what you're asking. I'm still not going to answer it," which was kind of my favorite thing. So it didn't matter. Like your point was across, and basically you were saying, how do you balance the short-term injury concerns versus your long-term concerns? Because you're going to go to the
because the postseason isn't a one-off anymore.
Yeah.
Like it's your postseason is like a month-long thing, and it could be multiple games. You could get a bye, you could not. So, like for example, a player like Elijah Surratt, who is potentially, and I guess to give people an update on the injuries we're aware of, Cignetti sounded very encouraged about the idea of seeing Aiden Fisher, who warmed up at Maryland but didn't play. It sounded like it was much more sort of 50-50, and it's on Monday, so obviously stuff's changed throughout the week. It sounded like it was probably more 50-50 in the Elijah Surratt conversation, and he said
we should note it was a hamstring injury for Surratt, but he also said
he's been dealing with something else. Yeah,
Surratt the previous 2 weeks had some other issue that wasn't related to the hamstring that got injured in the Maryland game, so that means he's kind of dealing with multiple things there, and so you wonder if a week off, and I mean, look, and if you get through Wisconsin, you have the bye as well. So I mean, you could
exactly. I mean, it's like a hamstring. It's just one of those things where not to like pick at anybody's pain here, but think about Tyrese Halliburton, like those kinds of like strains of like the muscles in your legs. All it takes is pushing it too far once, and it snaps, and then maybe your season's over, or at very least. Maybe you're out for 6 to 8 weeks, and it's like a race to get you back for the for a quarterfinal or something like that. So I mean, it's tough because the other thing is it's the theory is always, well, see if you can do it without the player, right, and then put them in if you need them. But that's usually not a good way to do it, because if a player is watching cold and then you put them in second quarter, third quarter, number one, they don't have a feel for the game. Number two, frankly, it probably shows a little bit of desperation to your team too.
And Evans will be out.
Yes, Evans. Like Cignetti said after Maryland, like it'll be a few weeks. And he said, and he just said on Monday, he just said Drew Evans will not be.
And has not said what it is. But the other thing he did say, because Caden Turner was also injured in that game, he said they didn't have anything serious. He didn't mention anybody else by name, but said they escaped anything serious in the game at Maryland. So. He didn't mention Turner by name. And Turner was used in those 3 linebacker packages. They weren't afraid to sort of go to the 4-3 without Fisher. But that was the only thing Kenny said about those. So I mean, they do have other guys too, but he didn't mention them specifically.
And I would probably that line of scrimmage is just the one area where I thought Zin Mahalski took a lot of flack early on, had a couple tough moments in Indiana's first couple of drives. I thought he got a lot better as the game wore on, honestly. And I know the PFF grades, the much discussed PFF grades this week were not kind to him. But if you watched the game, I'm not trying to sound like I'm not trying to sound like Mac Rhodes. We watched the film, but if you watched, he got a lot better. He got comfortable and he didn't have as much trouble as the game wore on. But again, if you talk about position groups that have underperformed for Penn State this season, that defensive line is at or near the top of the list. That's the group that we thought had maybe multiple all-conference players on it, and they just. We talk about the tackles for loss numbers. We talk about that. Watch. I was watching some of that Ohio State game because they had it on in the press sort of cafeteria area at the Maryland press box, and Penn State was just getting pushed around. It was just.
Yeah, if you're ranking sort of the injury concerns for IU, I think it goes O-line, these three positions: O-line, wide receiver, linebacker. I'm not worried about. As much as Aiden Fisher impacts the game, I think we've seen a clear enough body of work from Isaiah Jones that he could handle everything, basically, right? That it's not. There's no drop off, and even though I think maybe Aiden Fisher elevates the group a little bit, they can survive that. Wide receivers a little trickier because they don't have a ton of depth there to begin with. So Charlie Becker's good, but it really shifts the focus on Omar Cooper, and I think makes this offense a lot less dangerous with Surratt and Cooper. I just think it's so dynamic of a tandem that it opens up just a lot for IU. So I do think they can survive it because Cooper has shown. I think last week was a nice game for him in terms of what he's breaking tackles, extending plays. I think he had 5 of his 7 catches went for first downs. He was doing all the things a number one receiver should do, and he's sort of 1A. And so I you see how they get through it without Surratt, even though I think Surratt makes the ceiling of this offense so much higher. Offensive line, I think the time you're holding your breath for Indiana was when Benson went down, and it looked like Benson was going to have to come out with that ankle injury, and he sort of taped it up and played through it. What do you do after that, right? Then Mahoski's probably moving back to left tackle. You're going to a different interior player, and so I think you're worried about the depth on the offensive line because you probably can't survive another injury in terms of feeling really good about things because you brought Zen in because he was your 6th guy, but as we saw last year, if you lose more people at the same position, it stacks up and things can get ugly. And then I just think it's so important because you saw at the start when Fernando Mendoza struggled this year is because of pressure. His numbers are very pedestrian when he's faced pressure, as that you would expect, but it speeds him up and gets him out of the good habits that he's learned. Maybe that won't be the case as we get into the end of the season. Maybe he's kind of gotten past some of those bad habits, but I do think the formula is speed him up, and then he sort of starts making bad decisions, and you can get to this offense. I thought Zen, like you said,
this is
3 quarters was pretty good, but you don't, and he needs to eliminate penalties. He had 2 in the same game. That that's not acceptable. Cignetti's going to say that every day of the week, but I just think that would be kind of the way I'd rank it. But like you said, Zen, it got more comfortable as the game went on, and you want to see that from the start on Saturday because obviously he'll be in the starting lineup.
Yeah, Hoop says here how many teams can afford a major offensive line injury with NIL, no depth? No, the answer is most can't. This isn't the conversation
of Indiana. Yeah.
This isn't the conversation it was 10 years ago, right? Where it was you can't stockpile that talent at a level that other programs can. This is neither here nor there, but I just wanted to mention it because it was interesting to me. Did you see who went in at right tackle when the second team offensive line rolled in? Because Indiana in the fourth quarter pulled their second team in.
I wasn't looking.
Johnny went in at right tackle, not
Did
guard,
really?
which is where we've seen him work. He's been more of an interior guy, but he was playing right. I double checked it because I was wait a minute, did I see wrong? Was he at right guard? No, he was playing right tackle.
Well, maybe that's just to get him reps then there.
Well, it was the whole second team. It was the whole second team line.
What?
It was the whole second team line. They could put him wherever they wanted. They didn't put him in with the first team.
But I'm saying earlier this year, I think he was at guard, even when the second team came in. So maybe they're trying to get reps on, like they're doing with Zen, where he's now prepared to sort of be deployed in multiple spots. And so you get him game.
Yeah.
And I can look that up, I guess, to see if he played guard earlier this year because on PFF. But because
I'm almost certain he did, or at least he might have like once or twice last year because I think he played a little bit but redshirted. Anyway, listen. I think the last thing to kind of talk about Penn State, and we'll put it to bed and close with a little bit of hoops talk.
Yeah, Johnny did play right guard earlier this season, and
Okay.
that was his first. That was his debut at tackle. So there you go.
I can give you here. I will while we're talking, I can give you the entire second team because I once I saw a Johnny, I wrote it all down. Right tackle was a Johnny. Right guard Matt Merrick. Center was Liebfried. Left guard was Baylor Wilkin, and left tackle was Evan Lawrence. So I guess just file that away for next year because Indiana's probably going to need at least a couple of those guys to step up. The last thing I would just say about like just the Penn State in general is maybe more like I use road from here because I mean, listen, they are going to be. Buys. I mean, what's up?
3 buys.
3. I mean, they are going to be like that Wisconsin line. I don't know who keeps track of like the largest betting spread that has ever favored Indiana in a Big Ten game, like ever. But John Jacobs is worried that we're not going 203 minutes. But I mean, like that's probably going to push largest sort of like favorite line Indiana's been handed by Vegas in a Big Ten game, at least in kind of like modern time. Then you get the bye. Then you get a Purdue team that is better than it was a year ago, but is still clearly below where Indiana is this season. I mean, the other thing that sort of gives you some pause about this weekend, I understand Curt Cignetti is going to be like, the old Vince Dooley, Bear Bryant, like, these are the best players we've ever seen. I don't care that they're 1-8. Their punter's the best punter we've ever seen. Curt Cignetti just invented short snapper. I mean, like, no offense. He's like, they got a great short snapper, long snapper. Like, I've watched a lot of football. I'm sorry. That's not a phrase that I just don't know. Short snapper.
You don't know ball, apparently. You don't know
apparently
ball.
Not. I don't know if that's like field goal or if that's just the center. But short snapper.
Is that just like the regular? Is it his name for center? He's reinvented the name for center.
They've got a really good tall offensive lineman at one end of the line. If only we had a position for that. But like this also feels kind of like the weekend that Indiana. I mean, because if Indiana gets to 10 wins, Indiana's probably in the playoff, kind of no matter what happens, even if like just the wheels fly off in all directions. And then the other thing is, like, it does just feel like the last hurdle, right? Like the Wisconsin and Purdue are games that just all the evidence of our eyes and of this season tell us Indiana's not going to lose. Maybe though they won't look good, or maybe somebody said, "Do you rest some starters against Purdue?" Sure, maybe you sort of have that conversation, knowing what's waiting beyond this month. But like this feels like the last real hurdle. And it's not the hurdle that we thought it was, of course, when the season began. You and I both, I think, had Indiana losing this game. The world was a very different place then. But, I mean, this does just feel like meaningfully the last serious test Indiana gets before Indianapolis of anything other than health.
Yeah, I mean, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, Brian says you can mix the Wisconsin and Purdue rosters together and this still good. Probably not.
It's fair, right?
Probably not.
How many would start on IU too? That would be a good debate. It's like we said, Penn State has talent. It's there, but I mean, they haven't utilized it. So it's like how big of a threat they can be. I think the environment is scarier than maybe the team at hand still, right? Like because you've never won there and because it is one of those stadiums that can get loud. But
I mean, even then, like how many, I mean, like I know how this sounds, but what if there's only 75,000 people there and they're all spread out and the students leave at half?
Right. And that's the other thing. We don't know. Is it going to be like that? Like I said, it would have been a night, like you just don't know. I mean, the fan base is obviously going to be checked out. They've already made the coaching change. And the quarterback's not there. Like, what are you going there? And you said what, there were good 10,000 plus Maryland fans.
I would say about maybe. I mean, it's hard to tell because Maryland Stadium.
Your math is insane. Yeah, you're.
But I mean, it was certainly at least a few thousand. Like they were filling up most of like a 1/3 of the lower bowl by the end of the game.
And so does IU. Do IU fans take advantage because this is a moment that they haven't seen? And so like
I don't think you'll get as many IU fans here. You got to remember that like DC is a train ride from New York and Philly, and there are a ton of IU alums in New York, New Jersey, Philly, and DC, frankly, for that matter. And unlike State College, hotels aren't a problem in the DC, College Park, Baltimore area. So like you can just kind of jump down. But I mean, like Hoop says here, he says the get-in price for and I'm trusting that Hoop is telling us the truth and not just making it up, but the get-in price is $31 against the number 2 team in the country. That is a pronounced lack of enthusiasm at a place like Penn State. And I mean, I actually said this to Sean when we were just talking kind of after the fact, and I wrote about this, so it's not like I'm not like breaking some ground I didn't talk about years ago. When Indiana had that 2021 season where they got guys to maybe pass up on the NFL for a year, and they had this really concerted effort, like the whole staff came back and the roster came back as much as it could and all this. And then they lose the Iowa game, and then they're winning against Cincinnati, sort of a la Penn State with the Oregon game in overtime, and the Michael McFadden targeting, that game gets away from them, they lose it, and they never really get that season back on track. And people around the program kind of admitted later that there was just not a real ability to like rally, to sort of say like we're going to retreat to the Alamo and rally to go 6-6. Once it became clear that this offseason that had been sort of built on an obsession over doing something historic was going to give way to a season that was not going to be historic. Once it was like the thing we came back to do is no longer possible, there was not this sort of, hey, let's pull together and for pride of the program, blah, blah, blah. We will win this thing, and we will walk out 6-6 and we'll win our bowl game and whatever. It was just like, no, this isn't what we came back to do. There's no real, there's no blood flowing to it anymore. And it does feel a little bit like that's kind of where we're at with Penn State right now. But I do genuinely think, I guess, do you have a prediction before we wrap the Penn State talk? Do you have a prediction?
I did. I'd have to pull it up.
I actually haven't. I need to redo mine because obviously, I mean, again, things have changed. I have not redone mine yet, so you get to steer the ship on this.
Yeah, but I know I have to log in. It's on the. I know it's going to take me a second. You don't have a prediction. You can't share yours. Like what's your?
I think Penn State. I feel like the complexion is similar to the Ohio State game last weekend. It's close. Maybe it's a tie game at halftime. And then Indiana like 35-14, 35-17, something along those lines.
35-14 was my prediction. So
okay, like 30, just like in that, like a 3, basically like a 2-3 score Indiana win. By the end, that what happens to Penn State on Saturday is what happened to Penn State against Ohio State, which is that at a certain point the offense ran out of ideas that could move the ball and could genuinely kind of
the good team wins out in the end and wears the other team down and it puts it on a little bit. Yeah.
Really quickly on the start of the Darian DeVries era. I mean, listen, there was never any doubt who was going to win that game. I think, I don't think we learned anything really new about Indiana. I do think though, there was just a feeling in that building, like people were like, this is fun to watch again. And basketball, like, I mean, this sounds a little bit sanctimonious, forgive me, but basketball is meant to be an aesthetically pleasing sport. It doesn't stop and start. It's not about, the total execution of like 22 people all at once, or the sort of like frozen in time moments of baseball, or the frenetic energy of hockey. Like, basketball is meant to flow. It is meant to entertain. And quite frankly, Indiana has not played basketball that has done either of those things a lot in the last few years. And like, I think it's fine. I saw a number of people, and this was kind of why I wrote what I wrote last night. I saw a number of people who just seem to like almost like exhale and just sort of think like this is just fun to watch. And like for one night, that's fine. Eventually it's got to be something bigger than that, but for one night, that is fine.
That was palpable in the stadium, like when they did was it Conaway set up Reed for the alley
off the backboard dunk. Yeah.
It was like there was a sense of like, oh, we haven't seen anything like this in a long time, or we haven't been able to sort of enjoy the product on the court, in a long time. I mean, you saw all the assists, the defensive intensity, and was just on kind of both sides of the ball. The team was sort of playing to the fans and feeding off the energy, and you just really hadn't seen that sort of relationship. I mean, it's since I've been here, really. And you obviously have a lot more history, and can speak to how long it's been, but like you just didn't get the sense that any of these fans coming to these games were having a lot of fun in recent years. And so I think that's just where you want to start. Because like you said, I mean, they were completely Alabama A&M was completely overmatched. Like just,
Right.
I mean, like just, I'm going to call it what it is, right? Like this was going to be, I guess was the most lopsided win for a debuting coach, but like, it was going to be,
the only reason it was only 47 points was because Indiana, and I think we're going to see this again at times in the non-conference, was that Indiana was clearly managing itself by the end of the game. The guys weren't maybe.
Well, then Darian DeVries said basically when I asked him kind of about the second half defensively, he's like, "Well, we needed to execute better, but we're also just trying a bunch of stuff."
Yeah, yeah. And I thought Alabama. I noticed Alabama A&M ended the game on a 6-0 run. And it's like, well, yeah, because Indiana
they went to the walk-ons, and I think
walk-ons and freshmen. And again, anybody who's part of the rotation, by the time you're up 40, 50 points, is thinking it's a lot more important for me to save my legs here, given the injury issues we have elsewhere, than it is to go run this up and make some statement and get to 105 or 110 or whatever. I also thought the ball movement was the thing that jumped out the most to me. And that is something that that can be independent of the opponent. And I think there was one possession that was making the rounds on Twitter today. It was the one Devil D says, I think we lost to Indiana State by over 30. You lost by 21. I showed Mike that box score last night. A lovely trip down memory lane. Brenton Scott just hit, I think, 8 3-pointers that night. And then when Indiana lost to Fort Wayne a few weeks later, his twin brother Bryson Scott put it on Indiana. So the Scott twins were not kind to IU that season. The one that was most pronounced, and it's always funny when these possessions don't wind up yielding a basket, but it's Lamar Wilkerson catches the ball in the corner. He shot fakes his man into the air. He drives the baseline. Then he kicks it out to the opposite corner. Then the ball works its way all the way back around to Wilkerson, who has gone retreated back out behind the 3-point line for a wide open 3. And it doesn't go in, but it was a little bit like the Oladipo missed dunk against Michigan, where it was more the moment that Indiana fans were soaking in that really mattered. And again, ball movement is something that is independent of opponent, frankly. Like ball movement is that's an emphasis or it's not. And frankly, at times, I think it's fair to say, for a variety of reasons that we don't really need to relitigate, Mike Woodson's teams chewed the ball too much, and that point guards dribbled it too much. It would go inside, it would just kind of stick in there. It wouldn't come back out quickly enough, wouldn't come back out often enough. I mean, this team was just moving the ball at an incredibly crisp level.
Yeah, well, I think and DeVries has talked about how this team's maybe ahead of where he thought they'd be. Like his offense has been, he wants to get the ball up the court and get the shot in the first 10 seconds of the shot clock and pass the ball, move the ball 12 seconds. And he's like, they're there already. They're digesting what we're giving them and running the plays, running the scheme really well because they have a high basketball IQ. And so they're probably farther ahead with a completely new roster than he thought he was. And that's kind of how he kind of framed that after the game. And so you're kind of seeing that. And that's good because obviously they have Marquette a Sunday. And it's a big one because I think they need to win at least one of those 3 kind of big non-conference games. And they're playing at a high level, and they were playing, especially in the first half, at a high level on defense. And so, that's what you want to see kind of going into this, true test of what this team can do early in the season.
Marquette gave up 82 to Southern on Wednesday night, so it could be a lot of points. Could be a very high-scoring game in Chicago. We will be there. Provided Mike can get out of Pittsburgh and I allow him into Chicago and don't just have him held on the plane. But for now, for the Indianapolis Star, for the Bloomington Herald-Times, I'm Zach Osterman. He's Mike Niziolek. This has been Mind Your Banners for November 6th, 2025. Thank you so much for all of you who watched and joined us live. Thank you so much to everyone who listened wherever you get your podcast. Please remember to like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Read the Herald-Times, read the Star, and we will talk to you soon.